My son reached out to arrange a dinner to make amends. I was on my way to meet him, my heart full of hope, until a phone call from my attorney changed everything. Call me this instant. It's regarding your son. The news he shared shattered my world. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The front door slammed with a violent crack that made my teacup rattle in its saucer. Heavy, angry footsteps pounded across the porch, each deliberate stomp making the old floorboards groan in protest. I had barely put my newspaper down when Daniel stormed into my home without even the courtesy of a knock. "Dad, I need money right now. You need to sell this place and give me what's mine." No greeting, no apology for his forceful entry, just a series of demands uttered with a fierce desperation I had never seen in my son. His face was beet red, and his expensive suit was creased, as if he'd spent hours anxiously pacing in his car before mustering the courage for this assault. I stood up slowly from my armchair, motioning toward the kitchen with all the composure I could find. "Daniel, you seem agitated. Let me get you some coffee so we can—" "I don't need your coffee." He waved his arm dismissively, almost toppling the lamp on the end table. "I need answers. I need what belongs to me." "What belongs to you?" The words escaped with more sharpness than I'd intended. My hands shook as I steadied myself on the back of my chair. "This is my home, Daniel. I spent my entire life working for it." He let out a harsh, empty laugh that bounced off the living room walls. "You're going to be gone soon enough. What do you need a huge house for?" The sheer cruelty of his statement struck me like a physical blow. This was my son, the little boy I taught to ride a bike in this very driveway. The young man I had so proudly accompanied down the aisle on his wedding day. Now he was standing in my sanctuary, declaring me as good as dead. "Daniel," I began, searching for a glimmer of the boy I had raised. But he cut me off. He struck my coffee table with his fist so hard the wooden frame shuddered. "You're being selfish. Jessica and I have expenses you couldn't possibly understand. We have real problems, not like you just sitting around reading the paper all day like some—" "Get out." The command was quiet, but it carried an unshakable finality. Daniel froze mid-rant, his jaw slack. I said, "Get out of my house." I pointed to the door, my finger firm, despite the fury rising in my chest. "And don't ever set foot on this property again." For a second, Daniel seemed genuinely taken aback. He must have expected me to capitulate, to sign away my life's work without resistance. His expression shifted from confusion to anger, and then to something far more sinister. "You'll regret this, old man." He started for the door, then whipped around to face me once more. "When you're all alone in some nursing home, remember this was your choice." The door slammed behind him with even greater force than his arrival. Through the window, I watched him march to his silver Lexus, rev the engine with aggression, and speed out of the driveway, leaving tire marks on the concrete. I stood frozen in the ringing silence, my heart pounding in my chest. The house felt tainted, as if Daniel had left a trail of poison in his wake. Outside, the April evening was darkening, and the streetlights along Oak Avenue began to hum to life. My legs felt weak, so I sank back into my armchair. The newspaper was scattered on the floor where it had fallen. The coffee in my mug was now cold. I went to the front door and engaged the deadbolt, a precaution I rarely took, but tonight was different. My fingers rested on the cool metal as I tried to comprehend what had just unfolded in my own home. The silence was thick and suffocating. I moved through the room, my slippers whispering against the hardwood floors that Eleanor and I had refinished together 2 decades ago. Everything looked the same as it had an hour earlier, yet nothing felt right. I paused at the fireplace mantel, where a neat row of family photos stood. Daniel's high school graduation picture smiled at me, him in his cap and gown with that look of pride when he was accepted to the University of Texas. I had worked double shifts at the architectural firm for 3 months just to cover his first semester. My fingers traced the outline of the silver frame. For 42 years, I had given him everything. College was on my dime, his first car, help with the down payment when he and Jessica bought their house. The words hung unspoken in the still air. I picked up another photo. Daniel's wedding day, his arm wrapped around Jessica, both of them beaming with joy. I'd paid for half of that wedding, too, $20,000 I'd set aside for my own retirement, gladly given so my son could have a perfect day. Returning to my chair, I sank into the worn leather cushions that had conformed to my shape over the years. This chair was Eleanor's last Christmas gift to me before the cancer claimed her. She had saved for months, paying for it in installments at the furniture store downtown. I reached for the framed photo on the side table. Eleanor and I on our 35th anniversary, just 2 years before she passed. Her gray hair was styled perfectly, her smile genuine and warm. Eleanor, if only you could see what our son has become. But could she have seen it? Were there signs I had ignored? I tried to pinpoint when Daniel had started to change. Was it after Eleanor died? Or was the shift so slow that I simply chose not to notice? A habit from my architectural career, I started calculating in my head. Daniel's college tuition, $68,000. His wedding, my $20,000 contribution. The loan for his first house that he never repaid, $25,000. A business loan when he launched his consulting firm, another $30,000. Then there were the various emergencies, car repairs, and countless gifts. The total kept rising. Over the last 20 years, I had given Daniel over $250,000. Not loans, but gifts, handed over because he was my son, because I loved him and wanted him to thrive. And tonight, he had stood in this very room and demanded more, as if my life's work and my security were nothing compared to whatever financial trouble he was in. I thought I raised a good man. Where did I fail? The question echoed in the growing darkness. Outside, the neighborhood settled into its nightly rhythm. I could hear the Jacksons' dog barking a few houses down and the faint sound of a newscast from the Patels next door. But in my home, there was only a heavy silence and the weight of a betrayal I was still struggling to grasp. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 8. Eleanor had inherited that clock from her mother. It had kept flawless time for over 40 years. It was reliable, steady, and trustworthy. Everything Daniel was not. I closed my eyes and leaned my head back. Tomorrow, I would need a clear mind to decide what this confrontation meant for my future. But for tonight, I simply sat with the pain of knowing the son I loved without condition saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to his inheritance. The house creaked around me as it settled in for the night. The morning passed in quiet routine. I made my standard breakfast, 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, black coffee, and read the Austin American-Statesman from cover to cover. The familiar ritual helped to calm my nerves after the previous day's turmoil. I even spent some time tending to my small herb garden, inspecting the new spring shoots. Now I sat at my kitchen table with my afternoon coffee and a crossword puzzle, trying to impose some normalcy on the day. The house was peaceful again. Sunlight streamed through the lace curtains Eleanor had put up years ago, creating gentle patterns on the oak table. When the phone rang, I glanced at the caller ID and my stomach clenched. Daniel. I let it ring twice more, my hand hovering over the receiver. A part of me wanted to send it to voicemail, to reinforce the boundary I had set, but the part that had been his father for 42 years couldn't ignore the call. Hello? Dad, I want to apologize for yesterday. I was completely out of line. The voice was different, softer, more contrite than I had heard from Daniel in years. I sat up straighter, my grip on the phone tightening. Daniel, what's going on? You never apologize? There was a pause. When he spoke again, his tone held what sounded like genuine remorse. I realized I was acting like a selfish monster. The things I said about you, about the house. Dad, I'm so ashamed of myself. I stared out the window at Mrs. Garcia's rose bushes, trying to make sense of this abrupt turnaround. In all the years since Daniel had become an adult, I could count on one hand the number of times he'd admitted to being wrong. "I don't know, son. You said some terrible things." I know I did." His voice cracked slightly. "I've been under an immense amount of pressure, but that's no excuse." "You didn't deserve that. Can we please talk over dinner?" My free hand tapped against the tabletop. Something felt off about this, too neat, but it was also what I had been hoping for. A sign that my son still had a conscience. "Please, Dad, let me make it right." "The conservatory tonight at 7. My treat. Let me show you I can be the man you raised." The conservatory. Daniel knew it was my favorite restaurant, the place Eleanor and I celebrated every anniversary for the last 10 years of her life. He was playing every emotional card he had. But maybe that meant he was serious, that some part of him still cared about mending our relationship. I looked at the empty chair across from me where Eleanor used to sit. The loneliness I usually held at bay surged back. "All right," I heard myself say, "but this is your last chance." "Thank you, Dad. Thank you. 7 o'clock at the conservatory. I promise you won't regret this." After I hung up, I sat at the table for a long time. The crossword puzzle was forgotten beside my cold coffee. Outside, the afternoon sun continued its journey across the sky, but the quiet rhythm of my day had been disrupted. I wanted to believe Daniel's apology was sincere. I wanted to believe yesterday was his lowest point, and that he was ready to be a better man. But a small, nagging voice in my mind whispered warnings I wasn't ready to acknowledge. I walked over to the calendar on the refrigerator. Tuesday, April 15th. I circled the date in red ink, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe I sensed this dinner would be a turning point. 4.5 hours until I would find out if my son had truly found his way back, or if this was just a new kind of betrayal. I set down the phone and went upstairs to get ready, my footsteps echoing in the quiet hall. Despite Stephen's lack of details, Daniel's apology had sounded sincere, more so than anything I'd heard from him in a long time. Perhaps people could change. Perhaps yesterday was his rock bottom. Standing in front of the bathroom mirror, I examined my reflection. The man staring back seemed older than I remembered, worn down by recent events. Gray stubble dotted my cheeks and chin, making me look exhausted. Tonight required better. I lathered shaving cream, working it into a thick foam. The familiar ritual was calming. Each stroke of the razor seemed to scrape away not just whiskers, but some of the tension. This dinner was important. If Daniel was truly ready to make amends, I owed it to our relationship to meet him halfway. In my bedroom closet, I weighed my options. The charcoal suit hung next to the navy one, both neatly pressed. I chose the charcoal. Eleanor always said it made me look distinguished. If we were starting over, I wanted to look my best. The process of dressing felt ceremonial. A crisp white shirt, starched just as I'd learned in the Army 50 years ago. As I knotted my tie, my gaze fell on Eleanor's jewelry box. She kept my cufflinks inside, the silver ones her parents gave me for our wedding. I chose between a burgundy and a gray tie. The burgundy was a favorite, but the gray had been Eleanor's preference. "It makes you look trustworthy," she'd always said. Tonight, I chose trust. I chose the gray. At Eleanor's dresser, I picked up the watch she had given me for our 30th anniversary. The familiar weight on my wrist brought me back instantly. Christmas morning, 1992. Eleanor laughing as I feigned surprise at the gift I had seen her wrap days earlier. "For special occasions," she'd said, kissing my cheek. Tonight felt like a special occasion, in its own complicated way. Eleanor would be happy to see us together again. She always believed in second chances. "People make mistakes, Arthur," she used to say, after a difficult day with a teenage Daniel. "What matters is if they learn from them." My wallet sat on the nightstand, full from the pension check I'd cashed yesterday. I counted the bills, more than enough for dinner, even if I insisted on paying. Old habits die hard. Keys in hand, I checked my reflection one last time. The man in the mirror looked presentable, dignified, ready to give his son another chance. Maybe I had been too harsh. Tonight would be a fresh start. As I walked to the bedroom door, I felt a spark of hope, something I hadn't felt since before Eleanor's death. Real hope that our family could heal. Daniel was still my son, and sons deserved the benefit of the doubt. I reached for the light switch, ready to head downstairs for what I hoped would be our reconciliation. I was reaching for my coat by the front door when my phone vibrated in my pocket. The sound sliced through my optimism. I almost ignored it, but something made me pause. The notification was a text from Stephen. "Call me urgently." My fingers felt clumsy as I dialed his number. Stephen never used urgent language unless something was gravely wrong. The phone rang twice before he answered. "Stephen, what is it?" "Why the urgency?" "Arthur, your son Daniel called my office today. He was asking questions about your will." The words were like a splash of cold water. I leaned against the wall, my carefully knotted gray tie suddenly feeling like a noose. What exactly did he ask? He wanted to know if all assets go to him or if there's a portion for Chloe. Stephen paused, choosing his words. Then he asked about the process for contesting a will. Contest it? Why? My voice sounded strange and distant. Through the window, I could see the Jacksons walking their dog, the same evening routine they'd followed for years. Everything outside was normal, while my world spun on its axis. "Arthur, I think Daniel is planning something malicious. Please be careful tonight." I pressed my hand against the wall for support. The watch Eleanor had given me felt heavy and cold. "Stephen, are you sure?" Maybe he was just curious. He specifically asked about the requirements for mental competency, about what would happen if someone claimed you weren't of sound mind when you signed. Sound mind. The phrase echoed as the pieces clicked into place. Yesterday's rage, today's sudden apology, the dinner invitation to a public place where my behavior could be observed. My reflection stared back from the hallway mirror. An old man in a gray tie, dressed for dinner with a son who might be plotting to have him declared incompetent. The hope I'd felt moments ago vanished, replaced by a cold resolve. "What should I do?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Don't go. Stay home. Let me handle this." But even as Stephen spoke, I was shaking my head. Daniel thought he could outsmart me, that I was just another frail old man. He was about to find out how wrong he was. "No," I said firmly. "I'm going to dinner, but I won't eat or drink anything until I know exactly what he's up to. Arthur, please. I've handled worse than my own son, Stephen, but thank you for the warning." After hanging up, I stood in the hall for a long moment, studying my reflection. The man looking back was no longer naive. This was the Arthur who'd survived 2 tours in Vietnam, who'd designed buildings that still stood 50 years later, who'd buried his beloved wife and carried on. Daniel wanted to play games with his father's life. Fine. He was about to learn a very hard lesson. Maybe Stephen is wrong. Maybe Daniel just wanted to know his inheritance rights. The light turned green, and I accelerated slowly. A young woman in a red sports car zipped past me, probably thinking I was just another cautious old driver. She wasn't wrong, but tonight my caution served a different purpose. No, after yesterday's fight. It all makes sense. But I can't believe my son would... Another red light. A homeless man stood at the corner with a cardboard sign. I found myself wondering what series of events had led him there. Bad choices, bad luck, family betrayal. I reached into my wallet and handed him a $5 bill as he approached my window. He thanked me with genuine warmth. At least someone would benefit from my evening. I continued driving, my grip tight on the steering wheel as familiar Austin landmarks passed by. Wayne thought he could just swoop in and claim it all. I'll be careful. I won't eat or drink anything until I'm sure of his intentions. The decision felt solid. Daniel might be scheming, but he was dealing with a man who'd spent his career calculating stress tolerances. I could handle this. As I turned onto East 6th Street, the conservatory's distinctive sign came into view. The restaurant was housed in a converted church, its Gothic architecture beautiful and slightly foreboding in the twilight. Eleanor and I had celebrated so many anniversaries there, back when I believed the family was sacred. Traffic slowed as I neared the restaurant district. I signaled for the turn into the parking lot, my pulse steady. Whatever Daniel had planned, I would be ready. The naive father who'd dressed so hopefully in his bedroom was gone. In his place was a man who had learned that trust was a luxury he could no longer afford. But I would still be his father, even if he'd forgotten how to be my son. I parked and sat for a moment, watching other diners head toward the entrance. Normal families, normal couples, people who didn't suspect their loved ones of plotting against them. The Gothic architecture of the converted church looked welcoming in the soft evening light. Daniel and Jessica were waiting just inside, their faces lighting up with what appeared to be genuine delight when they saw me. Daniel rushed forward, pulling me into an embrace that felt completely different from his aggression 2 days ago. "Dad, it's so good you came. I've been thinking about us all day." Jessica joined in, her smile radiant as she took my arm. "Mr. Kane, you look wonderful." Daniel told me how much he regrets what happened. Their enthusiasm felt theatrical, but standing in their warm embrace, surrounded by the murmur of other diners and soft music, Stephen's warnings seemed distant. "I want things to be good between us, son." Daniel led us to a window table he'd reserved, one overlooking the downtown skyline. Jessica helped me with my chair, fussing over my comfort. The waitress appeared instantly. "We took the liberty of ordering wine," Daniel announced, gesturing to a bottle of Cabernet already breathing on the table. "Your favorite vintage from when Eleanor was alive." Jessica filled my glass with practiced grace. "This will be perfect for our reconciliation toast." I raised my glass, genuinely touched by their attention to detail. "To family," Daniel said solemnly. "To second chances," Jessica added, her voice warm. The wine tasted just as I remembered. As we talked, Daniel seemed like his old self. When the appetizers arrived, Jessica pushed the bruschetta toward me. "Daniel said this was your favorite here." Course after course appeared, each one chosen with my preferences in mind. Daniel carved the prime rib himself, placing the best cuts on my plate. Jessica kept my wine glass full. "Try this steak, Dad. The chef is a friend. Prepared it just for you. The meat was perfectly cooked." Daniel watched me eat with satisfaction. "And this sauce is incredible," Jessica added, spooning more of it over my portions. Throughout the meal, they shared memories I'd long forgotten. By dessert, the wine and their warmth had completely dissolved my suspicions. This was my family, trying to heal. Stephen's warnings seemed like the paranoid concerns of a cynical lawyer. Daniel paid the check with a flourish. "Tonight's my treat, Dad. My apology." Walking to the parking lot, I felt lighter than I had in months. "Let's do this again soon," Daniel said, his hand warm on my shoulder. I drove home with the windows down, humming along to a classic rock station. The drive home was pleasant, filled with thoughts of reconciliation. I even stopped to buy Daniel's favorite coffee, thinking I might invite him for breakfast. The house felt welcoming when I returned. I settled into my chair with the evening news, feeling more content than I had since Eleanor's death. The wine had left me relaxed. Around 10 o'clock, I made myself some chamomile tea, considering a call to Stephen to tell him he'd been wrong. That's when the first wave of nausea hit. It began as a mild queasiness, but within minutes it escalated into sharp, cramping pains that doubled me over. Something was terribly wrong. I stumbled to the kitchen sink as bile rose in my throat, my legs unsteady. The cramping intensified into bolts of agony. This wasn't indigestion. The vomiting started without warning, violent heaves that left me gasping. Between spasms, my mind raced back through the evening. The wine Daniel had chosen, Jessica's insistence that I try everything, the sauce she kept spooning onto my plate. Stephen's warning echoed, "I think Daniel is planning something malicious." My hands trembled as I reached for the phone, the numbers on the keypad blurring, as another wave of nausea crashed over me. I could barely hold the receiver. 911, what's your emergency? Hello, emergency. I'm very sick. I think I've been poisoned. Address is 1247 Oak Avenue. Sir, stay on the line. What are your symptoms? Severe stomach pain, vomiting, dizziness. I ate dinner out. Another spasm cut me off. Sir, can you stay conscious? An ambulance is on its way. The dispatcher's voice seemed far away. I slumped against the counter, the phone sliding from my hand. Through the haze of pain, one thought burned clear. My son had tried to murder me. The sound of sirens grew louder. Red and blue lights flashed through my windows. Heavy footsteps approached. Mr. Kane, Austin Fire, and EMS. We're coming in. A paramedic appeared at my side. She checked my pulse, shined a light in my eyes, and asked questions I could barely answer. Mr. Kane, can you hear me? We're taking you to the hospital. As they lifted me onto the stretcher, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. The man looking back was pale, aged years in a single night. But beneath the distress, his eyes burned with a new understanding. The ambulance sped away from Oak Avenue, carrying me toward St. David's Medical Center and away from the life of innocent trust I had lived for too long. Consciousness returned slowly, along with the steady beeping of monitors and the sterile scent of a hospital. Sunlight filtered through the blinds. My mouth was dry, and an IV line was attached to my left arm. I tried to sit up, but weakness pinned me down. The events of last night rushed back. Dinner, sickness, betrayal. Mr. Kane, you're awake. A woman in a white coat entered, her expression serious. I'm Dr. Chen. How are you feeling? You were brought in critical condition. What happened to me, doctor? We've been running tests, she said, pulling a chair close. They show the presence of a toxic substance in your bloodstream. Aconitine. It's a plant-based poison derived from the monk's hood plant. The word struck me like a fist. Aconitine, not an accident, deliberate murder. Oh, my son, that monster tried to kill me? Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose. Mr. Kane, if you suspect intentional poisoning, you need to call the police. This is a criminal matter. Aconitine. I'd read about it in journals years ago. Highly toxic, difficult to detect. Daniel had done his homework. How bad is it? You were fortunate. The amount suggests someone wanted to make you very ill, possibly fatally. But you received treatment quickly. With supportive care, most victims of aconitine poisoning recover fully. Most victims. The implication was clear. Dr. Chen explained the treatment. There was no specific antidote. I closed my eyes, processing the magnitude of Daniel's betrayal. Yesterday I was a father hoping to reconcile with his son. Today I was a murder victim who had survived by sheer luck. The police will need to collect evidence, she said. Evidence. The restaurant, the special meal, Daniel's insistence I try everything, Jessica's careful attention to my glass, their coordinated performance. How long before I can leave? Another day or two for observation. After Dr. Chen left, I stared at the ceiling. My son, the boy I'd taught to play baseball, had tried to murder me for his inheritance. The family I had hoped to rebuild was a fiction. In its place stood two cold-blooded killers. Daniel thought he was dealing with a helpless old man. He was about to find out how wrong he was. The taxi dropped me off at the Austin Police Department headquarters on Congress Avenue. Dr. Chen's discharge papers were in an envelope under my arm, evidence that would put my son behind bars. I need to report an attempted murder, I said to the officer at the front desk, my voice steady. 15 minutes later, I was sitting across from Detective Maria Rodriguez. She was a woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes that had seen enough family violence to take my story seriously. Mr. Kane, tell me everything that happened. I spread the hospital documents on the table. The toxicology report showed aconitine levels that could have been fatal. My son Daniel invited me to dinner after a major argument. I now understand it was a setup. Detective Rodriguez studied the records, taking notes. Are you certain the poisoning happened at the restaurant? Absolutely. Daniel insisted I eat a specific dish and drink a specific wine. His wife, Jessica, kept refilling my glass and pushing food toward me all night. I walked her through the entire sequence of events: the confrontation, my lawyer's warning about Daniel's legal inquiries, the manipulative dinner, and the meal that nearly ended my life. The aconitine was likely in the sauce, I explained, recalling Jessica's insistence. They worked together. Detective Rodriguez leaned back. Mr. Lane, this appears to be a clear case of premeditated attempted murder. We'll need to bring your son and his wife in for questioning. A surge of satisfaction went through me. Justice. Daniel has been desperate for money, drowning in debt from bad investments. He called my lawyer to ask about my will, specifically about contesting it if I were declared mentally incompetent. That establishes motive, she said, making another note. Along with the medical evidence and your testimony, we have grounds for their immediate arrest. She explained the process: warrants, arrests, and formal charges. I would need to testify at trial. Detective, they thought they were dealing with a helpless old man. They miscalculated. By 4 o'clock, Detective Rodriguez had my complete statement. Mr. Akane, she said, shaking my hand at the door, we take this very seriously. Your son and daughter-in-law will be in custody by tonight. I walked out into the late afternoon sun, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. The wheels of justice were finally turning. 2 days had passed since Daniel and Jessica were arrested. The local news ran the story: son attempts to poison father for inheritance. My phone rang constantly, but I ignored it. Today, I had business to finish. Stephen's law office was on the second floor of a downtown brick building. Arthur, are you certain you want to completely disinherit Daniel? He asked. We sat at the mahogany conference table where we had signed so many documents before. The new will lay between us, its language stripping Daniel of every cent. Absolutely. A person who tries to kill me doesn't deserve a penny. Stephen reviewed the document. We'd spent an hour going over every asset: the house on Oak Avenue, my retirement savings, life insurance, everything would go to Chloe. The entire estate, savings, pension funds, everything to Chloe. That's right. Chloe has always been a good daughter. I thought of my daughter, a third-grade teacher at Oak Hill Elementary, who had never asked for anything. She didn't know about Daniel's arrest yet. I would tell her after the trial. Daniel might try to contest the will, Stephen warned. Let him try. I have evidence of his crime. We included specific language about the criminal charges, ensuring that even if he were acquitted on a technicality, the will would explicitly state my reasons for disinheriting him. The signing ceremony took place at 2 o'clock. My signature felt firm, a declaration of control over my own legacy. The notary's seal made it official. Daniel would get nothing. The will is now legally binding, Stephen said as we shook hands. Daniel's attempted murder had cost him everything. The month since changing my will was a blur of legal preparations. Daniel and Jessica were denied bail. This morning, Chloe sat beside me in the courthouse hallway, her face pale with shock. Dad, I still can't believe Daniel would do something so horrible, she whispered. People change, sweetheart. Sometimes they become strangers. The courtroom was small and plain. Daniel and Jessica sat at the defendant's table, looking gaunt. Mr. Kane, please tell the court about the events of April 15th. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Jennifer Walsh, guided my testimony. I recounted the entire story: the demands for money, the manipulative dinner, the poisoning. Your Honor, my son invited me to dinner with the sole intention of murdering me for my inheritance. On the witness stand, I felt calm. This was my chance to ensure justice was served. The jury listened intently. Tests confirmed the presence of aconitine in the victim's system, the prosecutor announced, presenting Dr. Chen's medical reports. Daniel's lawyer tried to claim it was accidental poisoning, but the evidence was overwhelming. his inquiries about my will, his financial desperation, and the coordinated attack at dinner. When the jury returned after 2 hours, their faces were grim. Daniel Kane and Jessica Kane, the court finds you guilty of attempted murder in the first degree. Daniel's composure finally broke. Dad, I didn't mean to. It was an accident. I looked at the stranger who was once my son. An accident? You asked about my will the day before you poisoned me? The judge sentenced them each to 20 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 15. Their lives were effectively over. Chloe and I walked out of the courthouse together. The April sun felt warm on my face. What now, Dad? Now we live, sweetheart. We live with integrity, just like your mother would have wanted. Justice had been done. My family's betrayer would spend his most productive years in prison, while my loyal daughter would inherit everything I had built. The moral order was restored. Daniel had gambled everything on a single poisonous meal. In the end, he lost far more than an inheritance. He lost his freedom, his future, and any right to be called my son. If you enjoyed this narrative, please show your support by liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and sharing your thoughts on the story in the comments below. To hear our next story, click the video on the left. Thank you for your time.